Hello and welcome to ILTV's Insider. I'm Aaron Porras, and our main topic tonight is security, or the apparent lack thereof. Between Ramadan incitement, violent clashes on the Temple Mount, Israeli Independence Day, and Palestinian factions' political attempts to one-up one another, the number of terror attacks and attempted attacks against Israel sharply rising. In fact, in just 5 weeks' time, 14 citizens recently murdered and dozens more injured, nearly all of whom are civilians. Israel, however, despite all of the tools at its disposal, seemingly struggling to find the balance between protecting its population and projecting a politically tolerable global image. So what can be done and what is being done? Here to discuss is founder and CEO of Israel's Defense and Security Forum, Brigadier General in the Reserves Amir Avivi, and then former Arab Affairs Advisor to the Mayor of Jerusalem and CEO of the Jerusalem Institute for Policy Research, Dr. David Koren. Thank you both so much for joining us.
Thank you.
All right. Now, Brigadier General, I'll start with you. Starting in the south, Israel closed the borders to Gaza workers recently for a few days in response to Islamic Jihad rockets. Is this the right response, or are we just hurting the wrong people? And, if Israel truly wanted to hurt Hamas or Islamic Jihad economically, why are Qatari aid payments allowed to be carried through the border in cash?
Well, obviously, we see for a very long time mainly dealing with tactics and not with a full strategy of what to do with Gaza. Since the disengagement, Hamas took over, and there is no coherent strategy for how to deal with Hamas. At the end of the day, if you want to deter Hamas, really there is only two ways to do it: or threaten the leadership, or threaten a ground forces attack. And if you are not willing to attack with the ground forces in Gaza, you need to put a viable threat on the leadership of Hamas. If these two things don't happen, whether you have workers or you don't have workers, this is not what's going to change the ability of Israel to deter. I remind you that the idea of bringing workers in is new. We didn't have it in the last 1.5 decades. And Hamas still attacked us again and again. So this is not the answer for the threats of Hamas towards Israel. And we have to remember, Hamas is not only about Gaza. Hamas is affecting the whole region of Israel. It's affecting the Bedouins in the Negev, the riots in Jerusalem, things that are happening in the Galilee. They are affecting also Judea and Samaria. So we need a clear strategy regarding Hamas.
So, Dr. Koren, as Brigadier General Avivi just pointed out, there seems to be, on Israel's side, an artificial distinction between Hamas's activities from Gaza, not just Hamas, but Islamic Jihad as well. Their activities in Gaza and in Judea and Samaria, in Lebanon for that matter. Would you agree that that's the case, and what would the benefits of doing so be?
From a broader perspective, what we as Israelis are trying to do is we try to see the Palestinian arena as different parts of Palestinians, which means we have the Gaza Strip, we have the West Bank, we have Judea and Samaria, and we have the Palestinians, which are the citizens and residents of Israel. I think that what we can see in the last 1.5 years, from the last riots of May till these days, which is a matter of fact 1 year in broader perspective, is that the Palestinian side are trying to say to us, to the Israelis, you are differing between this kind of Palestinian and the other kind of Palestinian, but we see ourselves as one unique, united actor of Palestinian agenda. Right. And what is happening in West Bank, what is happening in Gaza Strip, what is happening in Jerusalem, and what is happening in Kalanswa is tied with all over the arenas. And the center of the Palestinian point of view is Jerusalem. And the heart of this center is what we can see right now is the Alaska Mosque and the Temple Mount, which means it's for the first time Hamas is telling us the things and the actions of Israel inside Jerusalem, inside Alaska Mosque, will affect our agenda and our policy
Well, so if Hamas,
in Gaza Strip.
if Hamas is saying this, then if Hamas and Islamic Jihad and Fatah, the Palestinian Authority, if all these factions are saying that what happens here is affecting all of us, we're all connected, and in effect, oftentimes we see that Hamas has been inciting certain actions in the West Bank and in Jerusalem, etc. Is Israel doing the right thing by holding different people to account, or should Israel treat them as one entity?
First of all, we would like to differ between the residents of Israel and the others, because the Palestinians of East Jerusalem and the Palestinians which are living in Kalanswa and in Jaljulia and other areas are legitimate residents and citizens of Israel, and they should be treated as ones. But if, of course, they take violent actions, we have to be very firm with them. But first of all, we as the Israeli side would like to differ, because first of all, we are committed to the residents of citizens of Israel as such, like we are committed to every other resident of Israel, whether he is Muslim, Christian, or Jew. But when we see the connection between what is happening in Jerusalem and what is happening in Gaza Strip being tied by the Palestinian side, we have to be very firm in order to say Israel will be Israel is the only sovereign in Jerusalem, and Israel is the one which will decide what will happen in Jerusalem, even if Hamas would like to threaten us and to intimidate us from allowing Islamic Jihad to throw rockets from Gaza Strip. Right. Israel should not constrain itself in its actions in Jerusalem. Israel is the sovereign in Jerusalem, but when we are dealing with Ras Kamos, when we are dealing with the Temple Mount, we have to be very, we have to take very wisely actions, because we have to bear in mind that every action that Israel is doing in Ras Kamos has a lot of effects in all over the Islamic broader neighborhood in the Middle East. And of course, we have tight connections with the Emirates, with Jordan, sure, with a lot of actors also in Egypt. So we have to balance between our sovereignty in Jerusalem from one side and our broader interest in the Middle East on the other side. And I think that the key is acting in a very wisely and a very moderate way in order to, first of all, be sovereign and not to allow any kind of violence in the Temple Mount, but to be very aware to the trends that we hear inside the streets of East Jerusalem, inside the streets of Kalanswa and Jaljulia, and what we hear. And just one last statement, what we hear is, of course, we hear a lot of issues of struggle against Israel, but we also can hear the voice of legitimate voluntarily leaders who say we would like to conduct a discourse with the Israeli police and with the Israeli leaders in order to calm down the flames in East Jerusalem. And always in East Jerusalem, you have a lot of actors that you can still speak with them in order to maintain the flames, and we have to balance between acting in the police side and doing the discourse on the civil side. Okay,
well, so I want to jump back to Gaza, and we mentioned a moment ago Palestinian Islamic Jihad firing rockets at Israel, and I know that Israel, as a point of policy, holds Hamas responsible for any attack that comes out of the Strip, as they are sovereign in the Gaza Strip. But maybe Israel should be targeting Islamic Jihad more specifically and holding those who fire the rockets accountable for those rockets. Brigadier General, how do you respond?
No, I think that Hamas is responsible. There is one responsible organization. It's just like in Lebanon. Lebanon is a sovereign state, and Lebanon is responsible for any shooting from the state of Lebanon to Israel. It would be unwise to start dealing with different fractions. It's not that we don't need to attack Islamic Jihad. Of course we do. We need to attack them. We need to destroy their capabilities and so on. But at the end of the day, it's Hamas that controls completely the Gaza Strip. The Islamic Jihad can't really shoot without Hamas consent. And the fact that they are using different militias, or for that matter, the Iranians, for example, are using Hezbollah or the Iraqi militias or Yemen and so on, doesn't make them less responsible. So we need to be really clear who is responsible here and deal with the Hamas leadership accordingly.
Well, so accordingly, by that same logic, whenever there's an issue that happens in Judea and Samaria, should Israel be holding the Palestinian Authority accountable, and to what extent?
Well, first of all, they are responsible for areas they are controlling. I must remind you that the Palestinian Authority has paid in the last decade 7 billion shekels, even more, 9 billion shekels to terrorists and to terrorist families. They are inciting in all of their schools against Jews and against Israel. And they are very much responsible for the fact that there is a generation of Palestinians who are growing in Judea and Samaria, which are growing to hate not only Israel, but the Jewish people, and are also taught not about an idea of a two-state solution, but about the idea of freeing so-called Palestine from the river to the sea, which means basically annihilating all of the Jews from their land. So, of course, they have a responsibility. It's a terrible organization. It's a terrorist organization. And I am looking for the day when this authority won't be with us anymore, and we'll have another solution, maybe based on
what do you think would replace the Palestinian Authority?
I believe more in the local leadership. I think it was, for the very beginning, a huge mistake to bring a terror organization from Tunis to rule local leadership here in Judea and Samaria. And I think that the Hamulas all over the place are fed up with this organization, because not only it's terrorist and inciting, it's also completely corrupted. And I believe that, whether people support or not support the Palestinian Authority, the day after Abu Mazen, I would predict there will be no Palestinian Authority. It's over. These guys have lost their capability to control. They don't control Jenin. They don't control Hebron. And if it wasn't for the IDF, which assists them, I think that long ago wouldn't have been in control of the area. Now we don't want Hamas. Hamas is even worse. But I think that they are not the solution for any future solution with the Palestinians.
Dr. Cohen, do you agree? Do you think that that Israel would have a safer environment without the Palestinian Authority dealing directly, with certain regions across Judea and Samaria, which is it reminds me of the Emirate model for the Palestinian Authority?
One of the possible models, definitely.
Sure.
First of all, I think I agree that the Palestinian Authority is a very corrupted organization. And in a lot of areas of Judea and Samaria, they are unfunctioning. They are functioning mainly in the areas of Ramallah and Jenin from the civic point of view, and in other areas from the security point of view, of course, only with the help of the IDF. But I think that the organization of the PA is so rooted in the leadership of Fatah that I think that I assume that when Abu Mazen will step down, we will see another leader from the Fatah movement, which will take the responsibility of what is happening in the PA. Maybe we will have a period of chaos, but I think that after several months, we will see that one of the various actors in the PA and in the Fatah movement will take the lead. I think that we have a lot of options. One of them, which is not actually realized because he's in jail, is Marwan Barghouti. The other option is Mukhaban Dakhlan. There are other options, such like Majd Faraj.
Is Dakhlan a real option? I mean, Hamas obviously banished him. He's not even currently in either Israel or Gaza or the Palestinian Authority. He's nowhere near. And as you mentioned, Barghouti is in jail, and he's arguably the most popular choice. And And again, aside from just security issues and maintaining a sort of status quo with the Palestinian Authority, is that the best path towards peace, towards Palestinian self-determination, in any sort of way? Or is there a better path towards peace and self-determination and a better future for all Israelis and Palestinians under a new paradigm?
I want to tell you something. Look, as a general, okay, I can tell you that the Judean Samaria is crucial for Israel's existence. Israel cannot exist without the Jordan Valley and without full security control in Judean Samaria, and you cannot have security control without massive presence of Jews. And what the Palestinian Authority is doing, it's doing two things that will endanger Israel in the long term existentially. They are taking control of Area C, and this is an existential threat for Israel in the long term. It's much more existential threat than a rocket. A rocket falls and explodes, and that's it. But when you take land, this is a big issue. This is something that you cannot reverse also. It's a problem. The other thing is that they are delegitimizing us all over the world. I mean, BDS movement is the Palestinian Authority. When you go to BDS website and you scroll down, it says the website is managed by the Palestinian fractions, even the other terrorist organization. But the heart of this endeavor called BDS, which endangers Israel's legitimacy, is the Palestinian Authority. Now, the way to transfer billions of dollars is through this Palestinian Authority. So I think that it's a huge threat. I think that the ideas of saying, oh, okay, Hamas is worse, so let's have this existential threat. I'm saying no, Hamas no, and this is in Palestinian Authority also no.
But
now,
again,
you said it.
Yeah, but again, I want to get more towards, instead of just keeping a status quo of security arrangements, what's the path forward? What's the best path forward?
Look, the Palestinian Authority, unlike what some generals say, has zero responsibility for Israel's security. It's the IDF, it's the Shin Bet that are doing the job. The Palestinians cooperate with us when it's about them. When they are afraid that there is a cell that might affect them, then they are willing to cooperate. They never deal.
And we know that currently they've suspended
Israel.
ties with Israel. We know, yeah, and as we speak, they've suspended security ties for a long time.
By the way, they suspended security ties a year ago for a very long time. Did it change the security situation of Israel? It changed only their situation, not ours. But we cannot rely on them. This is why we have the idea.
But again, back to my question, and Dr. Cohen, I want to hear from you on this. What is the path forwards, and not just towards maintaining security?
I think that the most interesting thing is the new trends inside the Palestinian community. What we can hear more and more are Palestinians that are telling the Israeli side, you are not offering us any actual opportunity to create two-state solution, Palestinian state side by the Israeli state. And of course, you are not allowing us to take terror attacks against Israel in the agenda of the Islamic Jihad and Hamas and other actors. So I think that what is new is that a larger amount of Palestinians is speaking about the one-state solution, which means getting into Israel, becoming a part of Israel in the state of mind of one man, one vote. And I think that what I hear from a lot of Palestinians that I'm speaking with them, if you won't go to the two-state solution, we will try to get into the one-state solution. And I think that this is the new challenge that is coming in the next months or years towards Israel, because if this two-state solution, as we see, actually do not have any it's not practical because of.
But on the other hand, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but on the other hand, it's not exactly feasible from Israel's perspective. Most Israelis see a one-state solution of absorbing millions of Palestinians as an equally existential threat to Israel.
Of course.
Yeah, but this is the big lie. Listen, they're trying to tell us a story that it's either one state or full withdrawal from Judea and Samaria and the Jordan Valley, and a two states, which is, of course, the end of Israel. There is no way to exist in this scenario for Israel. So I can tell you that we, as an organization, IDSF, we promote 4 different solutions, not one, 4 different solutions, which are excellent solutions, and don't adhere to this to supposedly only options that they are. There are other options. I can tell you that while national security and the national needs are quite rigid, talking about Israel, statehood, it's the most flexible thing you have. I mean, you have countries even like Vatican or Lesotho or San Marino, so many different kinds of solutions of territories and states. The US itself recognizes 50 different territories and states, which are all something that we might find suitable in Judea and Samaria. Trump, the US pushed a plan. It's not perfect, but
it was wholly rejected by Palestinian officials.
Sorry?
It was wholly rejected by Palestinian officials.
First of all, it's the question: what is the right? Let's say
something that would at least be a compromise, but
not measured by the question if the Palestinians want it or not. This is not the way you measure it, because they don't want anything. They want to destroy Israel.
Well, it would need to be a compromise, and final word, Dr.
We need
Cohen.
to decide. We need to build our own vision as people of Israel, as the Jewish people. What is the solution we want, a viable solution, and push this solution forward until we get it. But we are not talking about seriously viable solutions, ones that we can live with. We need to agree among ourselves and then worry about what other people say, whether it's the US or the Palestinians.
All right, well, it'll be very interesting to see how that plays out in the future. In any case, I want to thank you both, Dr. David Cohen and Brigadier General Amir Avivi. Thank you both so much for joining us.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
And of course, thank you all for joining us as well. I'm Aaron Porras, and this was ILTV's Insider. Please tune in next time for more on everything Israel, and let us know in the comment sections online if there's a topic that you would like us to cover next. And finally, for more of the latest updates from Israel, make sure to subscribe to our newsletter at iltv.tv and to sign up for our streaming platform, ILTV Plus. Thank you again, be well, and we'll see you soon.